Hey everyone, Tim Streifler here with Divi Life, and in this video I'm going to show you how to get started with Divi Overlays. So first of all, thank you so much for purchasing Divi Overlays. I'm excited for you to learn how to use it and start building all sorts of different kinds of overlays to your website with Divi. So the first thing that we're going to do before we start creating overlays is just show you how to download and use the licensing and install the plugin as well. So after you purchased the plugin, you should see your My Account dashboard within the Divi Life website. And let me just show you where to download the plugin. So you're going to go into API Downloads, if you haven't done this already, and you're going to click that download button right there. And that's going to download to your computer, downloads folder, or wherever you have your downloads sent to. And then the next thing we're going to do, because we're going to use it in a second, you don't have to, but we have right now just one layout template, which kind of gives you that classic modal look. Of course, you can build your overlay from scratch using the Divi Builder, and we plan to add additional free overlay layouts in the future. But to use your overlay layout, go over to Subscriptions. Oh, I'm sorry, it's over in Downloads. There we go. Okay, so you're going to go to Downloads, and you're just going to click on here, and it's going to download your sample layout. And we'll use that for the tutorial, but of course, as I mentioned, you can create your overlay from scratch. And so now that we have that downloaded, we're going to go to a demo website here that I have open, and you're going to install Divi Overlays just like you would any other plugin. I'm going to go to Plugins, Add New, Upload Plugin, choose File. Divi Overlays.zip is the zip file that we'll be uploading. Click Install Now, Activate Plugin, and there we go. And so you'll see right when you install it that there's a notice that pops up that says the Divi Overlays API key has not been activated, so the plugin is inactive. Click here to activate Divi Overlays. So we want to click here, and that's going to take us to the Divi Overlays API key activation, which it's found in Settings. And what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the API key and then plug in the API email, which is the email that you use to purchase Divi Overlays. And so I'm going to go over to here, API keys, and there is my API key. This is just a sample account that I have set up. Copy that. Oops. Come back over to the site here. Paste it in there. Now I'm going to do my API email. I just set up a sample email for this video. And this page here, the API keys page, you'll be able to see how many activations you have. So you can see I have 0 out of unlimited because this is a unlimited license. I'm going to come back to the site, paste it into the API email, hit Save Changes. And then as soon as that saves, you're going to see a message that pops up, and it says Divi Overlays activated. And then for me, because I have the unlimited license, it's a very large number out of a very large number of activations remaining. Basically, it's unlimited sites. And so if you ever need to deactivate a site, so if, for example, you're using a single site license or the 3-site license, and so you want to deactivate a site so that you want to go be able to use the activation on another site, you just go to API key deactivation there. And then you just click that and hit Save Changes, and it will deactivate the site for you. So the next thing that we're going to do is, actually I'm going to come back over here to the Getting Started guide. So we're going to be essentially following this guide in the video, so you can go back and you can look at this and look at it more closely. But essentially, we're going to follow these steps here. So really, with using Divi Overlays, there's 3 main steps. Step 1 is creating the overlay. That's just like using the Divi Builder, adding your content, etc. The second step is adding the overlay's content shortcode to your desired page. Basically, it's as simple as copy and pasting a shortcode onto the page, and that's going to add the content in the background, and I'll explain a little bit more why it's configured that way in a little bit. And then the third step is adding the overlay trigger. So this is the thing that you want to trigger the pop-up overlay. And so yeah, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to come back to my sample website, and after you activate Divi Overlays, you'll see the Divi Overlays menu item there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you can see here I already have a test overlay. I'm just going to trash that so we can start over. I'm going to go Add New. And the first thing, just like if you were creating a page or a post or a custom post type, is to give it a name. So I'm just going to do Test Overlay. One thing worth noting, though, is this title that you give it, the name, is only for your own organizational purposes on the back end, so you can identify what overlay is what. It's not going to display this title anywhere else, so that's just for your own purposes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click the Use the Divi Builder button, and this should look familiar to you if you're familiar with using Divi. And so I could go in, I can start adding columns, start adding modules, and just create my overlay from scratch, and feel free to do that. But for this tutorial, I'm going to use the sample overlay layout that comes bundled with Divi Overlays, and again, we're going to be adding more. So one thing worth noting, though, because this is a custom post type, you have to upload the layout directly to this page here. So you can't go into Divi and go to Divi Library and upload layouts there because they won't come up in this Divi Builder for this custom post type for Divi Overlays, because the way that Divi is built is that each post type gets their own library essentially, or when you go to load from library, it's only going to add items that are in your library for that post type. And so ideally, it's not ideal. I wish they would give you access to all layouts across any post type, but it's just the way that Divi works currently. That may change in the future. So you just need to make sure that you upload them directly to this page here. And so to do that, we're going to click on this up and down arrow, also known as the portability icon in Divi. And it's going to pop up this little window here. We're going to click over to the Import tab. We're going to click the Choose File button, and that's going to open up your computer files. And then you're going to want to unzip. If you download this directly from the Divi Life website, the classic modal sample layout, you're going to want to unzip it first so that you have the .json file. And then once you have the .json file, go ahead and just click Choose, and then Import Builder Layout. And this is a very small file because it's mainly just some CSS and a little bit of text, so it should import straight away. And there we go. So the layout, sample layout, has been imported into this Divi overlay via the Divi Builder portability feature. And so before we start setting up the trigger and adding the content shortcode, there's a couple more settings on this page that we need to configure. You could just use the default settings and hit publish. You can, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change the overlay animation. So the default's a fade and slide. It's kind of just very basic, simple animation. Of course, you have 11 to choose from, so I'm going to go ahead and just do slide down. That's a good animation. And if you want to see what the animations look like, you can go to divilife.com/divi-overlays, and the demo website has all of the animations on there for you to look at. And this page is still password protected as of the creation of this getting started video. So you can go to demos and you can view all of the different demos that you would, all the different animations, I should say, for Divi Overlays, so you can decide what you want to use. If you want a nice genie effect, the one we're going to be using is slide down, which just slides it down straight from the top, which is a nice one. So I'm going to go ahead and close that there. And so we have our animation selected. Now the last thing we're going to do is just the overlay background color. So Divi allows you to set section background with images as well as colors. You can do the same with rows as well as modules too. However, the overlay background is essentially it's kind of the equivalent of like the entire page background. So it's the background color for the entire overlay. basically this is going to go on top. So if you set an overlay background color and then you set a background image, or you set a background color here, the builder is going to go on top of it, so then you won't see it. So just to clear that up there. So I'm going to go ahead and select the overlay background color. I'm just going to select a nice blue here. Now this would just be a solid color if I leave it like that. However, I'm going to make it a little bit transparent to give it that classic overlay so you can see the content behind, and it gives it a sense of context on the page so you know where you are on the page. However, you could use it with just a solid color to focus on the content in the overlay. So it's up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and move this slider down to 97%. So it's just going to be barely transparent so you can see through it. So you can obviously, you don't have to select the color like I did. You can copy and paste the hexadecimal in here and then do the transparency. You can copy and paste an RGBA value, RGB, whatever. Now, one thing I wanted to note, you'll also notice the select overlay font color. You don't actually need to touch that because most of the time you're going to be controlling the font color within the Divi Builder. However, if for some reason you don't want to use the Divi Builder on a overlay, then you can set the font color here. So if you just wanted some simple text and you just use the default text editor, then this setting is here so that you can change the font color easily without having to do any custom CSS. So now that we have the Builder layout imported, which by the way, it's just some sample text here. We'll look at that in a few seconds, but this is basically all that comes in the sample layout, and it puts it in a little modal type layout with a shadow and so forth. And we'll look at that on the front end in a second. So we added the content. We've added we've changed the overlay background color. We've selected the overlay animation. So I'm going to go ahead and click Publish. I'm going to go back to the Divi Overlays screen because we're going to use this information here in just a second. So I'm going to go back to the guide here. So so far we've uploaded and activated the plugin. We've now created the overlay, imported the layout, selected the background color, changed the animation, and so step 2 is adding the content shortcode. And so let me just explain what this means exactly and why we have to add a shortcode to the page. But you'll notice that with Divi Overlays, when you click on an overlay animation, or I'm sorry, when you click on the overlay trigger, the overlay opens instantly. You don't see like a scroll wheel, you don't see like a loading little icon. It opens instantly, and the reason why is it doesn't have to go and fetch the overlay content because you add the content shortcode, which adds the content of the overlay in the background. So when the page loads, it also loads the overlay content as well, so that it's there and ready. So as soon as you click that trigger, or the user clicks the trigger, it opens up instantly and it's instantaneous. And so the reason why we have the content shortcode is, say you have a overlay that you really only want to use on one page. You only want to be able to trigger it from one page. Well, you don't want that content loading in the background of every single page, especially if you have a large site and you have dozens of different overlays to use on different pages. You don't want all of those overlays loaded in the background on every page when you're not going to be using them. And so the content shortcode basically will allow you to add that content to the page just where you need it. In another video, there's another article for global overlays. So if you go to the main Divi Overlays product documentation of the knowledge base, you'll see there's an article for how to create global overlays that can be triggered from any page. I'm not going to go into too much in depth in this video on what that means, but basically what that is say there's an overlay that you want to be able to use on every page. You don't want to have to go in and add that content shortcode on every single page, and so what you can do instead is you add it in a text widget. And there's a special sidebar area under Appearance Widgets that you drop that shortcode in, and that'll make it so it automatically loads across all of your pages, so that if you're going to trigger it from the menu, for example, or a footer, you don't want to have to go in and add that shortcode to every single page. So coming back to our tutorial here, we're going to add the shortcode now to our page. And so I'm going to go ahead and leave this screen open, and that's what I recommend doing for you, I recommend you doing as well, because we're going to use this information. But I'm going to go ahead and open up a new tab here, and I'm in a private window here because I'm logged into my test account here, so that's what's having me log back in here. Okay, so going into pages, and so what you want to do now is you want to navigate to the page that you plan on triggering the overlay. So I just have one page on this sample website here. And so you can do this from the backend editor, like I'm going to do in this video, or you can do it from the front end editor as well, the visual editor. It's completely up to you. It's going to work exactly the same. And so let's see, I'm going to go down to this module here, and I have some text. So this is where I'm going to add the text link trigger. And by the way, in this video, in this first getting started documentation, I'm only going to be adding a text link trigger. However, as you know, you can add any type of trigger, image, button, etc. But for this, we're only going to be doing a text link trigger. And so before we actually add the trigger there, we're going to add the content shortcode. I got a little ahead of myself there. And so the content shortcode is unique to each and every overlay. And so you can see here on the main Divi overlay screen, you have some information that corresponds to the overlay. And so the first one is this content shortcode. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And you can add this to any part of the page. So typically what I do is I'll add it into a code module. It doesn't need to be directly near the trigger link or where you're triggering it. It just has to be on the same page. So you can add it to the bottom just to get it out of the way. You can do whatever. For here, I'm just going to add it directly under. I'm going to put it in a code module, paste it there. However, you can place it in any text editor, so a text module, anywhere that accepts shortcodes, you can paste it. But I typically like to do a code module just to keep things separate. And so I'm going to change the admin label here to Divi Overlays content shortcode. This, of course, is optional, just for organization purposes, so you can see it here and know what it is. So now that the content shortcode is added to the page, now we need to set up the trigger. And so we've essentially done the step 2, which is adding the content shortcode to the page. So it's once I hit save, it's going to be loaded in the background, ready to go, ready to be triggered. And so now that brings us to step 3, which is setting the overlay trigger. And I briefly mentioned this when I got ahead of myself. For this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to set up a text link trigger. However, there's additional articles that are linked to for setting up an image as a trigger, using a button as a trigger. And once you learn how to use a button as a trigger, then you can essentially use any module in Divi as a trigger, because it's essentially the same type of setup. So to set up my text trigger, I'm going to go ahead and open up where I want to add the text. And so I'm going to come back over to the Divi Overlays screen, and the CSS ID is essentially what needs to go in the text link as the ID in order to trigger the overlay. So essentially the moral of the story is, to trigger any overlay, you just need to have the ID of whatever it is, a module, a link, an image, have the ID set as this ID right here. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. First thing I'm going to do is there's a text link template here. So I'm just going to copy this entire thing here. Oops, mouse was wigging out on me. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to bring that back over to my page where I want to add it. Now, since I'm copy and pasting HTML, I can't be in the visual tab. So I need to click over to the text tab, which will let me add some HTML. And so now I've pasted the text link template. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the text here, and I'm going to say contact us. That's what I want people to see on the site in the link that they click on. And then the next thing is we just need to update this ID. Since this is just a sample ID, we need to change it so it matches the one we're trying to trigger. So I can just copy that right there and paste it in. However, since the template already has that, I'm just going to grab these last 4 numbers here and replace the 940 with the 4083 that corresponds to my overlay. So, so now the text link is set. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hit save, I'm going to hit update, and now let's go ahead and view the page. You'll see this contact us link, that's the link that we added, and I click on it, there's my overlay. Now this isn't anything exciting because I just put in the sample layout and there's just that text module with add content here. So you can replace that with you can replace that text module with a form, additional text, images, whatever. You can remove the sample layout and use and start building from scratch. But this is essentially the overlay. So you'll notice here that the close button is partially cut off. That's just because I'm logged in and so this admin bar is here. If for some reason you have the admin bar displaying for logged out users, just for general users on your site, it doesn't happen very often, but if for some reason you do, you can easily, with some custom CSS, move this down. And if you don't know how to do that, just contact our support department, which the link is on our website, and we'll go ahead and help you with that. So that is how you create a text link trigger using Divi Overlays. For additional tutorials, just come back over here to the knowledge base, click on the Divi Overlays category, and you'll see a list of the documentation, tutorial articles, whatever you want to call them, that are on here. So using an image as an overlay trigger, using a Divi button module as an overlay trigger, using a menu item as an overlay trigger, which that one has a slightly different process because you have to enable the link relationship setting in screen options on the menus page. And then the last tutorial that we have on here is how to create global overlays. So again, if you're going to have like a general contact us Divi overlay that you want accessible on every page of your site, whether it's from the menu bar or from the footer or whatever, you're going to want to add that as a global overlay, so that way you don't have to go and add that content shortcode to each and every page. So that concludes this getting started tutorial here with Divi Overlays. Again, feel free to look at these additional articles. We'll be getting some videos added to that as well. And then if you have any questions whatsoever, contact us. Just click on that support tickets and open up a ticket, and we will get back to you as soon as possible with a fix or a explanation or whatever you need. All right, thanks again. Bye-bye.